In this video, I'm going to go over how you can use shoot mode to control virtual cameras in SceneForge Studio. I have this basic scene here with just an LED wall, a couple stand-ins, 2 lights, and of course, my camera. Now I brought in the camera by going to the library panel, going to the cameras category, and dragging in one of our 3 camera types. We have a free-floating camera, which doesn't have any stand and operates completely independently. We have a tripod camera, which has a tripod stand, and we have a much larger camera crane. The main difference between these objects is that the free camera does not have any physical restraints, as you can see over here in the properties menu, whereas the tripod camera is limited to the actual tripod itself, and the crane camera is limited to, well, the crane. For this example, I'm going to stick with the tripod camera, but in many cases, if you want to get certain types of shots, the free-floating camera may be your better bet. You can see I can control various properties of the rig, but by default, all cameras allow me to control the sensor type, the focal length, and the focus distance. To view the output of the camera, you can do so in a variety of ways. The quickest way, if you want to continue editing your 3D scene, is by clicking on this viewfinder icon over here. This will open up a movable viewfinder window that shows the currently active camera. You can see as I adjust these values, the camera will be changed over here. You can have many cameras in your scene and switch between them simply by clicking on them, like so. While the viewfinder serves as an easy way to quickly preview your camera, the main way you control the camera is in shoot mode. Shoot mode is a full-screen editor that includes a full-size viewport of the camera's view. This is in 1080p of whatever aspect ratio you select over here. But before we get to that, the main way you control the camera is by clicking and dragging with the left mouse button within this viewfinder. Right now I'm controlling the head of the tripod, but if it was the camera crane or free-floating camera, what moving your mouse will do will depend on the rig of the camera. I can move my mouse over any of these properties and use the scroll wheel, or 2 fingers, to adjust this property. You can see I can adjust the focal length, exposure compensation, focus distance, and aperture. While I'm holding down the mouse button, I can also use the arrow keys or WASD to move the camera around. If I increase the focal length, set the focus distance to my characters, and adjust the aperture, you can see the focal plane being adjusted. I can right-click or 2-finger click on a trackpad to set the focus distance to whatever I'm currently pointing at. I can turn on and off a rule of thirds grid over here, and take a snapshot and start recording using these 2 buttons. Taking a snapshot, like so, stores the currently active view of the camera, as well as all the camera properties, all objects visible in the frame, as well as a view from the floor plan of what that camera sees. This is usable in storyboard mode, like so, that we'll talk about in the next video. On the left-hand side, you have options for rendering the camera view. This is essentially the export menu that allows you to export the timeline to a video file. You can open up the color grading menu, which is the same as in stage mode, just visible here for further control. You can change the aspect ratio from 16 to 9 to 9 by 16. Change the recording mode, which I'll talk about in a moment. Choose whether or not you want to play the timeline animation on record. Change the camera move speed, rotation sensitivity, and options for the lens, such as motion blur, sensor noise, sensor pixel size, and vignette for various physical lens effects. We also have a section for mobile camera tracking that I'll talk about in another video. Now let's talk about recording. By default, the recording mode is set to motion. This means that when I move the camera around, it records the camera's motion to keyframes on the timeline. You'll see here, now I'm recording the camera's motion like so. And when I stop recording, it'll create keyframes of the camera's motion. The timeline will be gone over in depth in a later video. If I wanted to save this as a video file, I would click Render Camera View to export the timeline as a video file. What the other option does is allows us to actually, if you switch to video, record this as a video file. This may be better for certain setups where you want more control of the camera, but is not recommended for all use cases because the overhead of recording may take a toll on your CPU. If I open up my projects folder, in the video output folder, you can see I now have a video file of my recording. This is more for quick prototyping, as it doesn't give you the full options of the export menu, such as resolution, all the way up to 8K, and frame rate up to 60 frames a second. And that is an overview of how you can use SceneForge to control virtual cameras in your scene.